Welcome to our panel discussion as we celebrate Asian Heritage Month. My name is Mike Hogan, the communications manager and play-by-play voice of the Toronto Argonauts. And we just wanted to get into a little bit of a casual conversation today and thought we'd go to the source to bring in a couple of people who have been very important to the sport of football. Bryan Chiu played for a little over a decade in the Canadian Football League, three-time Grey Cup winner, and for 7 straight years was a CFL All-Star. Got into coaching after that with a handful of CFL teams, including the Toronto Argonauts. And he's back home in Vancouver and doing some high school coaching. And thank you for joining us, Bryan.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mike.
And Lori Bursey's here to represent the fans. And she has been a major one for the Toronto Argonauts in the CFL, starting back at Exhibition Stadium in the late 70s when she first bought her season tickets in the end zone, and has been a fixture at Rogers Center and BMO since, and now in Section 125, and 31 consecutive Grey Cups and 30 years as the president of the Friends of the Argos. So, Lori, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you so much, Mike. Great to be here.
I want to start with both of you, and Lori, we'll start with you on this one. And it's a very simple question. What made you fall in love with the sport of football?
You know, I guess my first game, I just fell in love with the game. It was so fast and there was so much action going on. And I think it was the crowd noise and the excitement that really hooked me. But shortly thereafter, I started meeting players. And when I first started going, I was 11 or 12 years old. And I met my first very favorite, Wayne Allison, at the time after the game. And he treated me like I was the only person who existed on earth. In fact, he was very much like pinball is today. And he was the one who really brought me into the game and helped me understand what it was like to be a professional football player and how they interact with fans. So it was really that. And so, you know, the whole approachability of players and the fans in the CFL is like no other professional league.
Bryan, same question.
How I got into playing football was more just my size. I was born at over 10 pounds, so I was kind of destined to it, I think. I just got a coach that was that embraced me and said, you know what, with your size, let's go out and give it a shot. And I knew nothing of it. I just knew that I wanted to go out and hang out with my friends. So at the end of the day, I just started playing and didn't know the rules. I was just reckless out there, but it was a lot of fun to hit people. And the best part about it was I got like trophies for it. I never got in trouble for hitting someone.
Well, the love affair has certainly been a long-lasting one, and the game of football is better for that. Bryan, I'll go to you first this time, and then I'll have Lori maybe give her experience afterwards. But from a football perspective, what was the first encounter you had that made you aware of your identity?
Oof, that's a really good question, Mike. I think, believe it or not, my first encounter was from my own family. Um, I remember when I first wanted to play, culturally, being Chinese, my family was kind of resistant to it. They thought it was a violent game, and they'd rather me concentrate on school or, you know, get into music or something less physical or less violent where, with the thought of getting hurt. So it took me some time to convince my mom to allow me to play the game as long as I was able to keep my grades up.
Lori, same question.
I'm not sure that I noticed it all that much. I think from my perspective, it was not only being Japanese, but also being a female. So when I first got interested in football, it was through my dad because he would watch it on TV. And it was abnormal for a girl to be interested in football. So I think from that perspective, it's one, but also, you know, from a Japanese perspective, it wasn't really a sport that many people followed. So I didn't really recognize a specific time other than it was just different to be a fan, being who I am.
Well, the good thing is, I mean, from the Japanese perspective, we've just signed Toshiki Sato
Yeah.
who is one of our global draftees, who is a kicker, and he's really excited to come over here. And he could be the first Japanese player to play in the Canadian Football League if he makes the roster. So fingers crossed. We've got an interview out with him that Sean Bowen did, and the kid really, he's not a kid anymore. He's in his later 20s, but he can't wait to come over here and play. There is that aspect of when it doesn't matter what you're doing, there's always that familiarity that can help you get acclimatized to a situation. So I'll ask both of you, and we'll start with Bryan this time. Uh, when did you? Who was somebody? Let me phrase it that one. Who was somebody that you looked up to that looked like you?
I thought about this. I've been thinking about it. There was nobody. And I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I don't remember having another Asian athlete or football player that I could really look up to. I know the history of someone like Normie Kwong, but I never, that was before my time. So I enjoyed watching just guys that weren't like me, but I didn't see myself as anything different, to be honest with you. I never saw color. I don't know. It's just I just like good football players, white, black, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. So I don't know if I have the right answer for that, Mike.
How about you, Lori?
I'm sort of the same way, Mike. And you mentioned Toshiki Sato. He is, in fact, the first Japanese born, or, if he makes it, a CFL player. But I remember watching football with my dad when I was a really little girl, and we noticed this guy. His name was Bill Hatanaka, and he played for the Ottawa Rough Riders. And in fact, I think he returned a punt for a touchdown during one of the Grey Cups. But he was the first Japanese, but he would have been Japanese Canadian born CFL player. So we did notice him, but since then I can't recall anyone else. So, but in terms of looking up to somebody in my own life who looked like me, it would have been my cousin Bryan. He was 6 years older than me, and he was a very accomplished hockey player. And he was on a team when he was very young, and was able to go over to Japan and play with his team. So that was really exciting. And he's always been into sports and always been really tremendous at it. So I think in terms of looking up to somebody, it would have been him.
We're all in cities here in Toronto, and Bryan, you're out in Vancouver
Yep.
with a large Asian community. Um, so there's obviously a changing demographic, not only in our big cities but across the country. So, Lori, let me specifically ask you about this from a fan's perspective. With the fan base changing, what do you see as the future of the game?
Mike, I haven't really seen the fan base change that much. I've noticed some visible minorities, but I based on the city that we live in here in Toronto, with the demographic that there is, I'm surprised that there isn't more of a visible minority in the crowd. So I would have to say it hasn't really changed that much, in my view.
Yeah, that is something that we're trying to change with the Argonauts. I know that last season, 2019, a couple of different occasions, I was able to go down before the game and address groups of quote unquote new Canadians of Asian descent who were going to their first Argo game, their first CFL game, and
Yeah.
sort of go over the rules with them beforehand. And, it turns out they had a blast at the game. And that's something that we have to be aware of, not only as an organization, but as a league, in trying to expand that fan base, especially in the larger communities. And Bryan, you've been a part of the game for so long in Montreal, and growing up and
Yep.
now back in Vancouver, and with a brief pit stop, for lack of a better term, here
Yep.
in Toronto. But how have you seen representation from the Asian community change over the years?
Um, for me, I mean, I'm at the grassroots level helping out the younger kids playing the game. And what I do see is more and more Asian kids playing, or just minorities in general, getting familiar with the game. Um, in terms of what we could do better, I believe that we need to get out in the communities, get out into those Asian communities, because a lot of them, they're not ones to put themselves out there. We have to make the effort to educate them, to let them know this exists, and just to get rid of that stigma that football is such a barbaric game, because it's not. It takes a lot of skill, determination, and regardless of color, anyone can succeed at this game.
Final questions for both of you, and the goal is obviously to make things go from being welcoming to being inclusive. And I'll start with you, Lori. How do we get there?
The Argos have done a great job. Jason Calero specifically has done a wonderful job with the Huddle Up program and going to schools. And it's very interactive and exciting. I've actually been to a couple, and the kids get really excited. And I wonder if they could integrate that with some sort of contest, because there are a lot of schools that have the majority of the students that go there are of a minority. Have some sort of contest, whatever that is, and the winner gets to take 3 of his friends and their associated parents to get them to at least experience the game and see if they like it, which I'm sure they will after they go to their first one. So, like you mentioned, Mike, speaking to the Chinese groups, and as Bryan has mentioned, educating these groups as to what this game is all about and how exciting and fun it can be. I think we need to keep doing that continuously over the years.
Mike, I think education, speaking up, and I think you can see the shift now. More and more people of Asian descent are not afraid to just be quiet anymore. I think that's a move in the right direction. To not be submissive, to not just take it, to be able to speak out and hear our voices. I think the CFL can do so much. And I think Canada as a whole, I mean, this is Asian History Month, right? But how many people really know why it's the month of May? I actually didn't even know about this up until a couple of years ago, that it's been going on since 1990. It's been 30 years and no one's really understood that. Why is it the month of May? I had to look it up, and I'm going to be honest with you, Mike. I didn't even know that. It was the month of May because back in the mid-1800s, the first Japanese immigrated to the U.S. And the other thing is that the month of May was when the first transcontinental railroad was completed, and it was done by a majority of Chinese laborers. I think those kind of things could be spoken about and talked about in the communities.
And you're right. I mean, the history of the Transcontinental Railway, and it's one to celebrate and be afraid of and terrified of all at the same time, because it's a major part of our history that just isn't discussed enough. So,
Right.
A good way to end this. I want to thank both of you for coming here. I don't know who that is pretending to be Bryan Chiu, but I don't know what happened to the rest of you. You look great, Ralph. Thank you so much for doing this. I know you don't want to wear the mantle of role model, but you are, and you've worn it exceptionally well for a long time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out and continuing to work with the kids. And Lori, man, I wish we could take your passion and bottle it up and distribute it. I don't know if there's a depth chart for fans. If you're not at the top of it, you're right there. So thank you both for coming on and sharing this with us today. And great catching up with both of you. And to those of you who are watching, thank you for taking the time to join us today. I hope you got something out of the conversation, and we can't wait to see you back at BMO Field.